Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Enough to Keep Going podcast. This is episode number 372, also known as the COD podcast. I'm just kidding. We're not going to talk that much about Call of Duty this week, I swear. Or at least I won't. I don't know about Game Logic. This is the episode number 372 for January 19th, 2025. I'm your host, Townmaster99. And with me tonight, unfortunately, is just one other person. DB's off again this week. Hopefully, she'll be back next week. We have Mr. Game Logic. Game, how are you doing?
I'm good. It's double XP weekend.
That's right. We'll talk about that later. All right, let's jump into our main GX stories. We got a few new stories. I shouldn't say quite a few. We have a few new stories up, so we'll jump into our main GX stories first. And Game Logic, you have the first one. The game, or with a Steam Deck game, looks like. Are you playing it on the Steam Deck?
Yeah, so this is one of those weeks where I kind of decided to prioritize some of my time on the Steam Deck, although that was royally foiled by me getting the alert from you that it was double XP weekend, so it only lasted for so long. But I did, at swim practice this week, pack my Steam Deck and got a chance to play a little bit of a game, Art of Rally, and I forget when this game came out. Probably 2 years ago, maybe. I don't think it was a 2024 release. I think it was maybe a 2023 release. But obviously, I'm a huge driving fan. So Art of Rally is a game. Actually, it was a 2020 release. Art of Rally is a game that kind of forces me to twist around in my seat a little bit. Meaning, it's a rally game, but it's not it's not a modern traditional rally game. And I'm a person who's been playing Colin McRae, Colin McRae's Rally, which is now the Dirt series by Codemasters. Literally been playing that game for about 20 years, right? Ever since the first one came out, maybe 22 years. I think the first Colin McRae came out in 2002. So I've played it, over 2 decades roughly, with wheel and pedals. And so when I think about Rally, it's really kind of from a purist form. And then, my second game that I unfortunately used to play now that the license has been given over to EA, although it is with one of my favorite studios, Codemasters, but under EA's leadership, Codemasters did EA WRC 2025, I think, last year, which was just atrocious as they made the attempt to shift from the Ego engine to Unreal Engine 5. And it was just horrible, and still is, as far as I can tell, last time I checked in on it. So Art of Rally, is a game that kind of harkens back to older times. It's a top-down kind of isometric view game. The camera can rotate. I didn't even realize that today, but as I was playing with the Steam Deck, my right thumb brushed one of the mouse pads, and then I was like, oh, I didn't realize the camera could slew. So it's that kind of a game. So it's not like the type of intense immersive rally game I've been playing, but it really lends itself well to pick up and play on the Steam Deck. I generally only play my Steam Deck for about 30 minutes at a time, sometimes longer if I'm on travel. But I also sometimes play it for less time than that. Like tonight, I had like 20 minutes before the podcast to burn. I was like, 20 minutes, that's the danger time to try and take a nap, because very frequently, often I don't wake up in time, so I end up running late. So I was like, yeah, let me not do that. But I was like, let me grab the Steam Deck, and I was playing this on the Steam Deck LCD, and in the span of about 15 minutes, run 3 or 4 races. Really lends itself well to that. So stages are about 2.5 to 3 minutes. Again, in stark contrast to Dirt or WRC back when I can't remember when Katon had it, and then you're running stages that might take you 5, 6, 7, 10 minutes, sometimes when they're like incredibly long, and those games are super realistic. So you don't have the depth of control that you sometimes have, and sometimes that's a little frustrating because you're trying to careen this little arcade racer car around the track, and you're often spending time in the dirt, and you're like, I play like hyper simulation, super realistic games. and I do better than this. But it's just kind of a virtue of kind of the arcadey controls. So I have a good time with it. It's you sometimes, looking at it, you would think that there's not that much depth to the career season, and there isn't that much, but there is, there are repair times in between stages. There aren't upgrades that you have to go through with the cars, and it's really also a historical look, kind of a survey sim look at rally. And so from that perspective, it's really nice because it really talks about like the history of rally racing through like the 60s. Like right now I'm in the late 70s, and rally racing has been going on since like the 60s. And so as you've gone through each era, it gives you some of the history in the background. It doesn't use real car manufacturers, so I'm gonna have to map that to the reality, but it has definitely been encouraging me to like go off in Wikipedia and look up the history of rally racing. So yeah, I'm having a good time with it. It's bite size. It can go. The nice thing about it is it can go from bite sized, like I said, like 15, 20 minutes at a pop, to like a regular 30-minute session, to also longer sessions. So it's a good time.
So is it always that kind of like isometric view, or do you get like a third or first person view that you can do?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, there's no, as far as I know, there's no way to switch the camera to like first person view or anything like that. So
Okay. I was flipping through some videos here, and I could have sworn I saw like a behind the back view, but maybe that was just like a trailer or something that they were showing. I think TB might have played this last year or maybe a couple years ago.
I would wager I'm sure DB has at least played a demo. Um, but yeah, and he may have spent some time with it. I don't think he spent. I've put about 7 hours into the game, which is a fairly, again, given the given the relatively kind of micro size of it, is not a small, not an unchunky amount of time with it. So but if he has played it, I don't think he spent that much time with it.
Okay. And is there? I'm sorry, because I was kind of in and out when you were talking. Is there like a campaign or like story, or are you just like racing?
You're just racing. There is a career mode, so it's not a campaign like in the traditional like story sense, or even like in like Formula One, where there's these new elements that have been put in over the last few years of there being some drama, and you're actually like in a story of being an up and coming Formula 3 racer who eventually gets and you have a rival and all. So it doesn't have all that menagerie around it. But like I said, it does have a career mode where you're tracking progression, each per stage, and then a roll up to to a rally, and then a roll up to how you're proceeding through the career mode. I don't think it actually tracks you. Basically, is in a regular larger scale rally game, there's the notion of the stage, and you place per stage, and then stages roll up to an overall rally, and then so you place per rally, and then that rally positioning rolls up to your position in an overall season. So there are multiple rallies in a season. In this game, there's a singular rally of 4 stages or so, and that composes a season. So there's not really seasonal tracking. Your real progression is you're trying to progress through a season, and then that allows you to proceed on to like this next stage of history, and then you get like the historical background of what was going on with the car manufacturers and things like that. So,
And you can use any car at any time or any race, or does it kind of pick one for you for each like history lesson?
you get a ton of cars, and but whichever one you pick, you are in that car for the entire rally. So
That race, okay.
you pick a car, and you're going to be in it for 4 races at least.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of those look pretty close to real world cars, even though I know you said that they didn't actually have the manufacturers in there, but
Yeah, it's kind of like a Hot Wheels kind of thing. Like you can tell what car, you could tell what the BMWs are and things, even though they're not called BMWs.
yeah, I saw B&W, I saw Mini Cooper, I think, in there too, and a couple other ones. Hey, Warwana, looks like he made it into the show. Thanks for joining us tonight. Okay, cool. Any thought of playing it on PC, or is that more like this is kind of a bite-sized thing for Steam Deck every once in a while?
I have played it on PC before, but from a scale perspective, it really suits. I mean, this is one of probably maybe the rare games that I would say like actually plays almost better on Steam Deck, or at least it's it's questionable whether or not it warrants lighting off a Beast of 12 fans, with a 360 millimeter AIO and sucking 400 watts TDP off the power supply for a GPU. So
Yeah.
like I said, I have played it, but I probably prefer to play it on Steam Deck.
All right. Yeah, it makes sense. It seems like a fit for Steam Deck. All right, let's jump into my game, which I also played on the Steam Deck, but I also played on PC. It is Dynasty Warriors Origins, which just came out this past Friday. Jumping back into the Muso. I forgot. I wish not Game Logic. I was going to say I wish Swiss was here because I know he would know how to say it. But that kind of style of gameplay where it's you against like an army, literally an army of warriors. So this is going back. This is actually so Dynasty Wars, if you don't know, is kind of like hack and slash. It's like a third person view. You're going against these armies of soldiers, and then story wise, it's kind of historically accurate, sort of more or less, here and there. But you have these fantastical, obviously moves and combos that you can do, and you got these like basically they're special powers because you can do like these super moves and stuff like that. So and ultimates, so that I remember playing these, I think since whenever they came out back in probably PS2, I think is maybe the earliest one where they came out, PS2 era generation, and I played them for quite a while, actually, up until probably maybe the beginning of Xbox One, maybe even the tail end of Xbox 360. I stopped playing them just because they were pretty much coming out like every couple of years, maybe even almost every year. And I think they had a spin-off. I can't remember what the spin-off series was. It was pretty much like that, but more of kind of ninjas and stuff like that. This is kind of more samurais, more or less. There's some ninjas, but they had a spin-off series too, which I played a little bit of those. I didn't play a lot of them. And then obviously, coming into the modern era, they had ones for Nintendo that came out for Zelda and Fire Emblem, I believe was the other one that they did for Nintendo, which is and I played a little bit of those. I still have those. I haven't picked them up in a while. So this one was coming out, and I was reading up a little bit about it. And you're basically playing an original character in the story through the campaign. It's not one of the generals that we've seen throughout, the series and stuff like that, or any of the famous people. It's a totally, unique story that you get to go through. So it's pretty cool. Man, when it starts off, it's. I was like, am I playing Final Fantasy? Because there's a lot of cutscenes, a lot of talking, a lot of like upfront story stuff, which I guess it's kind of different for the series, which it kind of makes sense since you're playing an original character. You're not just playing a famous general or something or commander. So it's kind of interesting to see them kind of go into that part. And like the cutscenes are, as far as I could tell, it's all you're just using using the game engine. It's not like pre-recorded. It's not like CGI or anything like that. So that's kind of nice too. So you kind of transition pretty clearly into the gameplay. So it's been really nice. Hi, Nate. He just jumped into the comments. So I've been going through that. I actually been playing pretty much every day since Friday. Playing it first on PC. It runs fine. It only goes up to high as far as like graphic quality, and that's you do have a ton of enemies on screen that you're going against at times, so it's probably can't be too taxing for if they want to try to get the majority of people playing this game. Obviously, it's on consoles too, so you can play it on consoles. But I was kind of surprised there is a setting in there and the graphics quality where, and obviously you can fiddle with like all the things specifically, but then they have the overall quality. They actually have a Steam Deck setting in there, which I thought was interesting. I've never seen that in any other game as far as I've played so far on my Steam Deck. It's just you put it on Steam Deck and it kind of basically lowers most of the other settings. So, and I flipped some back up to like medium-ish. I think maybe one was even high. I put back on maybe like effects or something, and it still seemed to be running fine. Like probably it's just like kind of sucking the battery more or draining the battery more than normal. But I just thought that was kind of interesting that they actually have a Steam Deck setting within the game itself. So it's kind of cool. But gameplay wise, it's pretty much you're just hacking away at people. You do get to there's light RPG elements. You get to level up your warrior, and there's different branches that you can go, like tree branches you can go through and level up different stuff. Looks like you unlock though like each branch as you go along, so I think there's 7 maybe 8 different tree, different categories, but it's just I can only do the one right now. I can't like skip around and do stuff, so it just must kind of go in sequence. So it's kind of interesting too. And then of course you can, you pick up weapons, and then you can switch off to. Right now I've only seen spears and swords, so I don't know if there's anything else. But those are the only two I've seen so far. And you can, I, don't, I you can't really level those up, but you just get different ones. You just find stronger ones as you're playing, or you can buy them. There's a shop when you're visiting different towns, that you can like buy stuff and sell stuff. So I've already sold a bunch of my weapons off, the weaker ones. Excuse me. Then there's other kind of power ups. So there's a little bit of crafting, if you want to call it that. There's like these gems you find throughout the world, throughout the overworld, and I'll talk about that in a second. That you pick up, and I guess you could find different ones. I've only found one kind of gem, and it's something I never heard of. I don't know if it's just something that they made up for the story, or if it's just I've never heard of this item before, this material. But you just pick it up, you take it to once again one of the cities, and then you can craft. It's basically like a buff that you can use, and I think there's 6 or 7 that are available to me right now that I could switch between, and you can only have one activated at a time. So I've been doing that too. Just every time I see these things, I'll pick them up. But yeah, it's pretty fun game so far. It's not open world, so you do have an overmap. It's almost kind of like Super Mario Brothers 3 or something, or like those kind of Mario games where you kind of move around like this, the big map. It's kind of weird though. Like you see the map of where you can go, but you're the character that you're moving around is like giant. It's like a full size character, like human character. So it's kind of funny that they did it like that. But so you can you just move around that overworld, and you can. There's certain spots that are like lit up or highlighted that you can stop at and either fight, or their towns, or there's a person that's sitting there. You can talk to him. Sometimes they'll give you stuff, or sometimes that's the only thing I've seen so far. I don't know if you can fight anybody like randomly there, but yeah, it's been really fun to get back to that style of gameplay. I always enjoyed, it's when you're playing that there is, counters, and you can block and stuff like that. And I've actually been blocking a lot more than I used to in the old past games. It seems like it gives you a lot more. You can do a lot more counters when you do that, and it's more powerful when you get the right, block or parry at a certain time. So that's pretty cool. Which like I said, I never really did any blocking in the past games. I'm using it a lot more, and it seems, and it probably is, because these systems and the consoles and the PCs are more powerful. It seems like there's a lot more enemies coming at you than there used to be in the old games, and even kind of surrounding you, not just coming from like one side. Like if you hit him and someone flies off in back of you, he'll just come right back, and hit you from the back, instead of like kind of circling him back around to get information, to come and attack you with the rest of the army. So it's kind of cool that they're doing that too. So you do have to have some strategy, but it's still kind of just, for me, it's just kind of more kind of turn off my brain a little bit. It's not like all these other games that you play sometimes, like Elden Ring, or even just like other action adventure games where you kind of have to really think about stuff that you're doing. Here it's just kind of more like a muscle memory that you gotta do the counters and stuff and attacks. But I'm having a really good time with it, and I'm going to stick with it just because I haven't played one in such a long time.
Can you talk to me a little bit about like the objectives in each battle? Like, are they the same every single time, or like it's a campaign, so do you have like different battle objectives, in different scenarios, or is it just kill everyone right in the enemy force?
Yeah, pretty much so far that I've seen. I mean, I've played, I think, just under 3 hours so far. And yeah, it's been, well, to be honest with you, in those 3 hours, I really haven't seen too much action as far as the campaign. I've done probably a little bit more side quests, I guess, or side battles, but those are just like straight up, hey, there's an attacking force at this village, or outside a village, you gotta clear them out. As far as the campaigns, the two that I've done, or the one that I've done really, where it's kind of the classic, I don't know, and I don't know if you have ever played these games before. You kind of see the map. You start at the bottom of the map, and you see the objective at the top, and there's kind of few branching places here and there they can go, but it basically all leads to the same place, the same boss. So that's the only thing I've done so far, and that's kind of the classic Dynasty War kind of a battle that you would do. So I don't know beyond that, and I've only been really in one zone so far, maybe two, I guess if you want to call it, because like I guess the tutorials kind of its own zone, but it's still part of the whole as a map. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. So hopefully it gets, maybe hopefully you get to do other things than other than just, hey, take out this general, at the end of the map here. But we'll have to see what happens.
How about the environments? So I've dabbled like in these games here and there every once in a while. It seems like what I remember is that the character modeling has always been, pretty beautiful. But my question is a little bit about, how are you feeling about the artistic style of the backgrounds, but then also on the maps, is there any like impactfulness from like the environments, or like are they all kind of the same, like it's just big flat map? Are there structures that play a difference? Is there verticality on the maps, anything like that?
There's a little bit of verticality to that first map I played, where actually I think I kind of I kind of skipped where I was supposed to go because I saw like this little I was on this little cliff. I was like, oh look, there's guys down there, and I was like, oh, I could jump down there, but I thought it was just gonna stop me, but I actually let me jump down there, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm in the battle now, like, and it was one of the kind of the minor, not a general, but maybe like a commander or something. So I took him on and was able to do that. So that was kind of cool. I wasn't just walled off from that. I didn't have to exactly follow the path because I was with another an NPC that was helping me. So instead of going his route, would have kind of taken me around the map, and I probably would have had to fight at least a couple other like minor battles before I got to that guy. I just like skipped straight to him, so it's kind of cool. But otherwise, like I said, I've only done the one map, and I'm kind of just in the one area, and it's kind of just like little bit of a hilly, and kind of you go into these valleys when you battle, which they're trying to like wall you off from everything else, I guess, kind of keep you in that contained area. So I mean that's fine, but in the overall map, I could see like different, like I could see like a desert, I could see like mountains with snow on it and stuff like this, which I can't reach yet. I haven't opened those sections up yet, so hopefully the terrains at least change a little bit. And then as far as like other aspects of the environment get into play, not really. There's a little bit of destructibility, like there's like these kind of like walls that I think kind of guard towers that they have around, and like they have like little fences and stuff around there, and like barrels. Some of that stuff you can break, like if you hit somebody and they'll fly into it and break it, or you can just like break it down with your weapon or whatever. But not all of it, which is kind of weird. Like there'll be like a fence, and then there'll be like a barrel in front of that fence, like those that you can break. But then behind that, there's like boxes and maybe some more barrels, but that stuff you could. So like, all right, that's kind of weird, but I was like, whatever. I guess they didn't want everything destructible. So there's a little bit of destructibility so far. Like I said, I'm not too far in, but we'll have to see if it gets a little more complicated or complex later on. All right. Ramon, looks like Ramon has joined us too. Thank you for joining us. Let's jump into our news headlines. And Game Logic, you have the first one up with AMD's Ryzen Z2. Go.
Yeah, so this this news story over on Digital Trends by Kunal Kular. AMD's Ryzen Z2 Go disappoints an early benchmark. A recent YouTube video that showcased the gaming capabilities of AMD's upcoming Ryzen Z2 Go chipset, designed for budget gaming handhelds. As part of the new Ryzen Z2 lineup, the Z2 Go's capabilities were tested on a Lenovo Legion Go S compared to last year's Z1 Extreme powering the Asus ROG Ally X. So I put this news story in the rundown because we talked last week about the Lenovo Legion Go S being announced at CES. The article goes on, according to gaming performance data shared by FPSVN, the Z2 Go shows some limitations compared to the Z1 Extreme. In Black Myth Wukong, it achieved 36 frames per second versus 40. It goes on. In general, the chip benched about 4 to 6 frames behind the Z1 Extreme, which results in around a 7 to 10% drop across all games. Now, we've talked a lot in recent in the last few months. Really, mostly since I went PC gaming only, because as such I don't spend as much time on the console news. And so on the channel, there's been a slight uptick in how much PC gaming hardware we cover. And I've included like keeping an eye on handhelds, because I'm personally interested this year if we're going to get Qualcomm providing CPUs, and NVIDIA providing CPUs, and we're really going to see the space heat up. I think this has been, as much as various pundits have been touting the handheld gaming space, I feel like it's very tepid. Like, great that the Steam Deck has sold like single digit millions of units, but like that's not a multi-billion-dollar business. So it's interesting to watch this space. By the same token, we get this a lot in gaming too, in PC gaming hardware, and I've never understood it. In 25 years, I've never understood it. Like, something benches like 10 frames behind something else, and it's like, oh my god, it's a 10% like power deficient. Like, I'm like, okay, like, once again, gamers don't play frames per second. Gamers play experiences. And yes, I know in the PC gaming space, there's a lot of us who get wrapped around the axle about frames, but literally, it's a talking point. It doesn't really make, like, my Call of Duty gaming scales anywhere from where I'm playing at high 90 frames per second up to like in excess of 200 frames per second. And yes, yay, verily, when I'm up above 200 frames per second, the game's more enjoyable. It's butter smooth. I tend not to miss stuff as much, but like, it doesn't, like, when I'm playing at 90 frames per second, I'm not like, this is trash and completely worthless for me. Like, it's not like that. So on a handheld, being 4 frames per second behind, I don't know. Yes, is that less than? Yes. Is that AMD's Ryzen Z2 Go disappoints in early benchmark? I don't know that it's that hyperbolic. So look, if you're looking to squeeze every last drop of frame out of a gaming handheld, obviously the Ryzen Z2 Go isn't going to do the same thing as the Z1 Extreme. But hopefully, theoretically, you're paying a couple of $100 less for handheld. And if you're buying a handheld because for a lot of consumers, it replaces the position that has historically and traditionally been held by laptops, then then just shaving a couple $100 off the price is good. The ones of this product category that actually perform, what I would call well, to me, are on the Windows side, are grotesquely expensive, and they're endemic of the same problem we've always had with Windows devices, which is ultra mobile PCs, tablet PCs, in any of these kind of uber niche boutique things that I love. When the things that are really good and really highly performant, they just never get the price down, and that's where these things are right now. So yes, you can go get a thing that performs arguably better than a Steam Deck, but it is not priced right within a reasonable consumer ballpark. So if you're going to go low end, that's fine, but then understand you're going to get probably 4 frames per second less, and I don't think that breaks creates cognitive dissonance over where you are in the budget. I don't know. Tao, any comments on this one?
No, yeah, I was looking at the specs here between the Z2 Extreme, Z2, and the Go, and yeah, I mean, other than the threads and the gigahertz, probably a little bit lower. Everything else is fairly decent. Cache, I guess, is pretty low, but everything else is like it's pretty much there. And people, and even like Ramon and everybody on the chat's talking about, like, unless you have like something side by side, like, you're really not going to know the difference unless it's like marginally, like, like a huge margin difference. Then yeah, of course, obviously you're going to see it. But I mean, like you said here, what was it? 7? What'd you say it was? 7 to 10% a lot difference. No one's gonna notice that, especially on a handheld. So it's just it's kind of crazy. I see this with my son sometimes too when he's playing stuff and he's talking about FPS this and that. I'm like, look, you're not gonna see the difference. Like, don't worry about the FPS if it drops. A few frames here and there when you're playing. Siege or Call of Duty, or not Call of Duty, Fortnite or something like that. Like, you just in the middle of the action, especially in those kind of games, like there's a lot going on. So it's like you're just not gonna see it. So it's just kind of funny sometimes. But and the weird thing is, like, I've never been like that. Like, I've never like cared. I'm playing on the Switch, for God's sake. I played like Call of Duty, or not Call of Duty. I played like Fortnite and Rocket League, especially Rocket League, where it's it's very fast motion. And I can tell the difference from Switch to like my PC or even like an Xbox or something. But I'll still play it on. I don't care. Like, as long as it's somewhat smooth, and it's smooth. 30 frames, okay, it's 30 frames, not 60 or anything like on everything else. But I can play it, so it's not a big deal. So I think, yeah, just, they just had to get their their articles out there just to do the comparisons and stuff like that. So that's fine.
We're gonna talk about that a little bit. This has been a big SEO week where like many people talked about things that are already. And look, I mean, particularly people in the chat, you guys know me. By no means am I saying frames FPS don't matter. You guys know that I get super cranky when a very high end game on a very high end system comes in at 30 frames per second. I'm like, what is that, right? And I dig on PC games when they launch and they're not ultra widescreen compatible, because I use ultra widescreens and it makes me bonga cranky, right, when I've got black edges on the side. So you guys know that I'm all for performance. And so when you're making a buying decision, and you're looking at, hey, this thing costs exactly as much as the next thing, or maybe even costs more than the next thing, and yet it's putting out 7 to 10% fewer frames, that's a discussion and an argument. But when the budget device that is budget price puts out less performance than the high-end thing, then yes, we just simply should say that makes sense and move on to the next article.
Speaking of which, go ahead and go to the next news article. Okay. Nothing to do with technology, though. Sort of, not really.
And I'm probably running behind on my banners here. This news story over on VG247 by Mark Warren. Dragon Age, the Veilguard game director, Corinne Bush, is leaving BioWare, having spent 18 years at publisher EA. Bush, along with John Epler, was one of the main figures responsible for overseeing Veilguard's final push across the release finish line. This news story has been updated. Corinne Bush has now confirmed to Eurogamer her departure from BioWare and EA via statement, in which she wrote, "My departure was voluntary, as I have been presented with an opportunity I couldn't turn down. I don't want to say much more right now, but you can count on it being in the CRPG space and upholding the traditions of great characters." Dragon Age Veilguard game director Corinne Bush is reportedly leaving BioWare, having spent a total of 18 years at publisher EA working on various titles. At the time when it was initially reported, this was according to Giant Bomb's Jeff Grubb, whose confirmation of Bush leaving has since been corroborated by Eurogamer. Rumors of Bush's departure have been coupled with speculation about the closure of BioWare's Edmonton studio, the latter of which Grubb has suggested he doesn't currently believe to be happening. So, we've talked about this before. I mean, people move on, and when you're, and particularly when you get up in the ranks, the typical way it goes is, you're senior, you have a lot of sway, but there's still people in the chain of command that are above you. And when an opportunity comes along for you to go run your own show and not have somebody looking over your shoulder, that's an opportunity that you jump at. By the same token, developers, creative directors, producers, they will also often leave just to go do something different, right? They've been look at some of the franchises we have. Like Jade Raymond leaves Ubisoft. Yes, that's because she had done like 3 Assassin's Creeds, right? And she was looking to move on and go do something else. The PGR creative director left and opened his own studio. Why? Because not PGR. Playground Studios creative director left to open up his own studio. Why? Because he had done Forza Horizon like 5 or 6 times, or 4 or 5 times, right? So these things happen. The reason I pulled this article and felt it was significant is because BioWare is a studio that we've seen, and we've talked recently about how, part of the thing that happens with franchises is we fall in love with them, and then we don't understand sometimes why franchises take a turn, like Andromeda, or some other great franchises that go along and then hit their iteration where they do a thing that isn't as good as what they've done in the past. And we're like, what happened? Well, the truth behind that is because a lot of times the makeup of the development team is like entirely different, right, than the team that put together like the first 3 Mass Effects. So at BioWare we've seen these way, and even though, right, these are people on different IP and working on different products, we've seen this fluctuating leadership, and we now know that there was a mass exodus of people over time, and a lot of them left, and that's why they've had some of the production that they've had. But then over time, we've slowly been kind of evolving to this new rise of leadership that's come along. That has now gotten, been part of the leadership, on a thing like Veilguard. And so to see turnover happening again, right, of this kind of secondary. And I've talked a little bit about this, about like the evolutionary arc of studios, how a lot of studios that we have talked about kind of in the meat of the 2000s, right, in like the 2010s, right, these studios that kind of had their burgeoning starts in the early 2000s, and then kind of in the end of the 360 PS3 generation and into PS4, right, really became like these big studios. And part of the problem is that the generations of gaming that their leadership came from, but then also how they're evolving over time versus the new generation of gamer that's coming in, right? The new generation of gamer that's coming in is looking for a different kind of content than the creative leads are producing, because those creative leads were heavily influenced by video games of the 90s, right? 80s and 90s. So it's a whole thing. So it's just interesting that we're kind of in this second hump of leadership at BioWare, and now we're starting to see kind of, unfortunately, some of those principal leaders like leave the studio again. So, which kind of creates in my mind, oh boy, what are things going to look like, next time around? So it's just interesting to keep an eye on. Tao, any comments?
No, I mean, just I saw not just on this site, but other sites too. Talking about it, and those other sites sometimes are like they're doom and gloom, like, oh, Veilguard was terrible, or whatnot, and all this. But I mean, looking at reviews and stuff, it's it's hovering around 8-ish. Like, I think when you average it out, so I mean, it did fine. Commercially, I don't know how it did. I don't know if EA considers it a success or not. But I just kind of hate when you get those kind of things with people. They're basically just speculating, because like we didn't even hear an official announcement until we saw this update too, which was what was that, a few days later from the initial report, or maybe that same day. Actually, I think it was just a little bit later in the day. But people just like to speculate. But hopefully this doesn't mean that the studio closes, because we haven't heard any updates on that. But hopefully they'll get to keep going and at least do other things if they don't do any more Dragon Ages. So we'll see.
Yeah, and of course, BioWare consists of multiple studios, multiple teams. So I don't think huge fear that BioWare themselves are going to go away, but as this article speculates, there may, and they've consolidated studios before, right? Because the studio that was working on the Star Wars game or whatever before, in the wake of like Anthem, they closed that studio and they moved all those people to, I guess, EA Motive, which now I can't remember if Motive shut down or if they moved people again. So yeah, it will just be interesting to see as it progresses.
Yeah, and Ramon notes that on Blue Sky, she said, don't read too much into it. So yeah, it just might be, hey, she's, like you said, she's going on to a different opportunity, so a better one. Well, maybe not better one, but better for her maybe in the gaming world. All right, so you want to jump into our next developer news? It looks like here, unfortunately, is bad news.
Yep, and I'll cover this one really quickly. This news story on GameIndustry.biz by Vicky Blake. Godfall developer Counterplay has reportedly shut down. Whilst not formally confirmed, a since-edited LinkedIn post stated the studio had disbanded. Had supposedly disbanded, stating that the studio had disbanded after a partnership with Jackalyptic fell through. Over the past 6 months or so, our project at Jackalyptic has been supercharged by the world-class devs at Counterplay Games, the statement began. It's impossible to overstate their impact. From the very first day, they put their shoulders to the wheels like it was their baby. Unfortunately, we were unable to continue our partnership into the new year, and Counterplay Games was disbanded. It concluded after sharing profiles of those impacted by the changes. The post has since been edited to erase mention of the closure. And so Counterplay Studio was the studio that had the game Godfall, which was backed by Gearbox. And it was a PS5 launch title that landed with very little of a peep of a splash. So, unfortunately, the industry winnowing continues for studios that don't really wind up sticking the landing and punching above their belt. So, it's an unfortunate increase in the competitive nature and the shark eat shark world of the gaming industry right now.
Yeah, and if you want to just jump into the next one, since it's pretty much following in its footsteps, so fortunately.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. So this news story over on Shack News, Microsoft also announces layoffs and job cuts across gaming, security, and sales divisions. The spokesperson for the group said the job cuts affect a small percentage of its departments based on performance. And this one's going to go back and forth about the whole performance thing. Microsoft is set to lay off a number of its employees across multiple departments in the weeks ahead, claiming that the cuts are meant to weed out low performers as it ventures deeper into the new year. The layoffs will affect Microsoft's gaming, security, and sales divisions. Not sure if it points to exactly where in the gaming division. So this may not be, there are a couple of articles. So if I'm not mistaken, the word that's on the street is there's one story out about there being performance-oriented layoffs, and then there's another story about another round of layoffs following that one that is not performance-related. So I've had a little difficulty in kind of pulling that apart, but just from a performance aspect, Microsoft was notorious in the Ballmer years about doing stacked rankings, which I grew up under, and I don't personally have a huge problem with it. And I'm just going to be straight out. Companies that claim that they don't do stacked rankings, I feel like there winds up being stacked rankings. They're just very contrived and kind of not spoken about directly. But the huge difference, right? I think the reality is stack rankings always exist because you're always going to have a list, even if it's in your mind, of the people who are your top employees and the people who are your bottom employees, like 1 through 100. That's just the way it is. Now, the thing that Microsoft was notorious about that is out of the norm is that they would periodically call like the bottom 10%. So you did stacked rankings, and then there was a periodic, deliberate, okay, it's time to cut the bottom 10%, and you just kind of kept going through that cycle. So they're not quite back on that yet, but it's just not unusual when a company is pivoting, and I'm not talking about Xbox, I'm talking about Microsoft to want to restructure, because I mentioned this before. I've mentioned this before when talking about Xbox, right? The talent that they had on deck is probably not the talent that they need to skate into the future. Toys for Bob doesn't really necessarily help them with a ton of cloud enablement, right? And competitive games that build communities that where somebody playing on phone, somebody playing on tablet, somebody playing on a console, and somebody playing on PC feel like they're playing at parity, and no one is a second-class citizen. I don't know that that's in Toys for Bob's bailiwick, right? But they're occupying positions on the roster, and Amy the Hood's not going to let you hire more people without like giving something up. And so there is a restructuring going on. There's a swap out of talent, and one of the things that has concurrently gone on is this week Satya designated, I want to say like 60% of their developers. He designated some large bulk of their development force as tagged for AI work. So there's going to be, and I'm pretty relatively certain that we're going to see a big reorg coming up here at Microsoft here as a result of that. Because it's not really clear to me who's like the AI czar at Microsoft. It seems like all distributed. But if 60% of the development force has been tagged to work on this one thing, you're going to see some people moved around and some new leadership structures put in place. So on the gaming side, kind of an identical thing. There's restructuring, pivoting, re-strategizing. Like I said, that probably means that that old talent that they had wasn't necessarily where they're going. And now here, by the same token, they're getting rid of low performers. So getting rid of low performance isn't unusual. Getting rid of talent that you have on deck when you're doing a major strategic pivot, because you need different people with different skill sets, is also not unusual. That being said, all of this is unfortunate. Microsoft is obviously a multi-trillion-dollar company, making statements saying that they can't afford to keep people. So I'll just leave that as it is. Tao, any comments?
No, I was just gonna say in the previous article for Godfall, they had mentioned that there's already 150 developers that have lost their jobs just this year alone so far. So, and this is before obviously the Microsoft article that came out. But like I said, they're doing it across like several different divisions, though, not just gaming. So, I mean, that's going to happen. I had one other thought, but now I can't remember what it was while you were talking. So let me jump into the next article unless you have anything else on that one. If I remember, I'll come back to it. So we finally, unless you've been living on a rock, we finally had the reveal of the Nintendo Switch 2, at least hardware-wise. And I guess we know it's officially called the Nintendo Switch 2. I don't think that had been officially said yet. They always just called it the successor when they talked about it earlier or later in the year last year. So they basically just had a video that they sent out to various, obviously their YouTube and whatnot, just basically showing off the hardware. And there's like no voiceover or anything. It was just basically music in the background while it was kind of 360 going around the system. It is bigger. I think I read somewhere it was like 7.9 inches. So the screen definitely bigger than the OLED, which I'm not quite sure how big the OLED was, but it is definitely bigger than OLED, and obviously the original Switch, and obviously the Lite. Still, have the Joy-Cons on the side. It's an all-black system now. The only color you see now is on the kind of underside of the sticks on either side for each Joy-Con. There is a new button, I guess, on the right-hand side that they didn't mention anything about yet. So, and obviously there's speculation on that, but who knows what that's going to be. It's right underneath the home button. Potentially, and this is another rumor that I think it's been going around for a while too. There's one part in the video where they kind of detach the Joy-Cons, and they kind of like zoom around the system itself, and kind of like morphs into the new system from the old one. They do kind of the same thing with the Joy-Cons, and the Joy-Cons were facing you, and then they kind of go down on the sides and go down and kind of slide in along the table or whatever they're showing. So people are speculating that maybe there's some kind of mouse functionality, which I guess has been speculation for a while. That might be kind of cool. Maybe we'll see some RTSs come on the system. That'd be nice. Not that there haven't been, I don't think, on there anyways, but obviously it's a little bit more easier if you got like a mouse that you can use when you're using those kind of systems. Some other differences I saw were there's actually a USB-C port on the top and the bottom now instead of just the bottom like they had before. So that's kind of nice for charging. That's going to be kind of nice. So you're not like kind of awkwardly holding it as you're playing it like you usually have to do. I think they showed the dock off, but they only showed the front of it. So we don't know if there's a LAN port or not, like there is on the newer switches, and I'm assuming on the OLED too. So I don't know if that's on there, but the dock's pretty much the same. It's a little rounded on the top edges. It's not as squared off as it was before. So just like I said, there's just a hardware reveal. It kind of zoomed around the system itself. So it's kind of anticlimactic, I think, because we don't really know anything else other than they did mention the backwards compatibility, I think, at the end of the presentation, where old Switch game, most of the physical and digital release Switch games will be that you can play those on the Switch too. Now there was an asterisk saying that it's going to be most of them, not all of them, so they didn't specify that. There's going to be a direct for the Switch 2 on April 2nd. I saw a lot of speculation that I wonder if they purposely didn't do April 1st just because that'd be kind of funny. I think they should have done that just because it's Nintendo. But so there'll be a big reveal. I'm assuming they'll go through some of the software possibly too when they go through that reveal. They only showed one game, and that was a Mario Kart game. People are assuming that's Mario Kart 9. I would say don't assume, because you never know. Could just be another update to 8 Deluxe or something, 8 Super Deluxe. But more than likely, it's probably in Mario Kart 9 or whatever the next iteration of Mario Kart is. And then people were, of course, picking that apart too. And they noticed that looks like there's going to be 24 players instead of the 12 that there has been before when you're racing. And now it showed, I guess, on one of the parts, like I think right off the starting line, there's like 12 characters there, but there was another spot for another 12 if it was all full. So that's once again, that's still just speculation if there's going to be the whole 24 or not. And go ahead.
So so initially I gave that some credence, But now I'm looking at this picture, I'm like, that's wild speculation. Because if you actually look at this starting grid, yes, there are 24 slots on it, but none of the vehicles are lined up on any of those slots. So it's not like there's 11 slots that are populated and then like 13 left over. Now, maybe that's because this is somebody playing single player and maybe they don't really use the grid, maybe. So yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting. But I don't know that this picture corroborates that there are 24, you know.
Yeah. It could be in the middle of a race too, like they're already going. So obviously, because they're now,
that's possible. Yeah,
they're all kind of close together. But yeah, there are 24 spots. So I mean, once again, though, it's speculation. And then also someone pointed out, and it wasn't in the articles here, but someone has pointed out that the Donkey Kong model, I guess, is more akin to the kind of the movie, which is kind of more akin to like old school what Donkey Kong, looked like back in the day. So there's a little bit of difference there too. Other than that, I think there's only been I was kind of looking before the podcast to see if there's anything else officially announced. There's some like kind of indie games that are coming now to the Switch 2. They've actually been announced. Well, I think 2 were officially announced, and then there's another couple that were just kind of speculation. I think one of them was what was it was an old rare developers that they went their own way, that they did Banjo-Kazooie. Those guys, they went and done another kind of 3D platform, and I guess they're going to remaster that, and that's supposed to come to Switch 2, which probably more than likely it will. But yeah, there's no other official announcements on any other kind of software for now. So I'm assuming during that direct they'll probably talk more about that, but we'll see. Any other comments on that, on the backwards compatibility or anything like that?
Yeah, they made their statement about, hey, backwards compatibility just made sense and it's what consumers want. But also indicated that not every game will be backwards compatible. Well, the article that we have in the show notes, which is a VG247 article, talks about these probably being titles that have some hardware dependency, like the original Joy-Cons or whatever. I actually, what I wonder is, I suspect that there's something that has to be done to make Switch 1 games compatible on Switch 2, right? That it's not just, rename the file extension from SW1 to .SW2 right in the game ports. Probably doesn't need like a ton, like the normal effort you have to do when actually porting a game, but there's probably something. And it's probably something the developer has to do and then re-upload, right, their executable to the store. And for that reason, this is why they're probably saying, not every game, because they can't guarantee that every developer is going to take those actions. And if you look at the Switch back catalog, it is rife with. I'll stay above the line of not directly calling it shovelware, but there's like tons of games that come out every week on the Nintendo Switch that are of, I won't necessarily say ill repute, but very little to no repute, because they suck up a lot of the mobile games. And so if you can't guarantee that a lot of those developers who were fly by night, flash in the pan, single title, going concerns, then you probably hedge your bets by saying, well, not every game.
Yeah, I mean, I could see, well, 2 things. Like, it's probably not as maybe complicated as, when Xbox was doing their 360 and original Xbox, coming to the One. Probably not that bad, but obviously, there's going to be some work that you have to do, like you said. And maybe also like third-party stuff. I mean, they probably leave that to the developer more than likely. I mean, obviously they're going to help, but, that's probably another thing. Other than like, people mentioned, like you said, the Ring Fit Adventure and maybe Labo. Obviously, that's not going to work because the controllers themselves are larger and they wouldn't fit into those kind of straps and the different holders that they had for those devices. So, yeah, it's. I mean, I was like, okay, cool. Like, we know about it. We've seen it. So I really want to know more about the internal stuff. What is it? What's it running? How does it run? Is it I can't remember. Was the Switch was only 720 or did it get to 1080?
It was 720 on the handheld and 1080 when you project it to a TV.
Okay, so it'd be interesting to see if it's still the same, or if it's 1080 on both, or what all that internal stuff is, and then obviously software is going to be a big thing. So we got all those articles from Game Industry Biz, Destructoid, and VG247. All right, so let's continue on in the Nintendo news. Not so great Nintendo news. So over on, once again, Game Industry Biz, from Vicky Blake, Nintendo under fire once again for omitting original devs from the remaster credits, and I believe this is retro. Well, this is retro for Donkey Kong Country Returns HD Remaster, which just came out, I believe, was coming out, and I think they were left out of the Metroid Prime Remaster also in the credits. And I, not in this article, but there was another article where they kind of give, I guess they kind of give a reply, basically saying they were always trying to give the developers their just due, but I mean obviously the credits just don't have, supposedly they just don't have retro studios in there, where they're obviously the original development team. So it's just kind of weird that they're doing that. I don't know if they really did anything for Metroid Prime. I don't think so. As far as I've seen, I was looking once again, I think yesterday actually. Couldn't really find anything that if they like patched it in there, whatever, but it didn't look like they did. So I don't know if they really do anything other than saying, yeah, these guys did it. But, there was another studio, Forever Entertainment, that actually handled the remaster this time. So obviously, they're in there, but no mention of retro games, unfortunately. So, or retro studios. So kind of a bummer. I mean, I don't know if I haven't really ever seen news like this on anything else, not that I can remember. So I don't know why they kind of seem to do this more often than not. Any comments on this one? If not, go ahead if you want to go into the next article.
Okay, rounding out the news segment, this news story over on Rock Paper Shotgun. PlayStation put the axe in a live service God of War game alongside a project from the Days Gone studio. This news story by Brendan Caldwell. Looks like Sony have caught the live service jitters. The company have canceled 2 online multiplayer games, including one based on God of War, according to a report by Bloomberg journalist Jason Schreier. 2 different Sony-owned studios were recently told to stop development on their projects. One of those studios is Bluepoint, known for their work on the Demon's Souls remake. They're making the unannounced live service God of War game, according to Schreier. The other studio is Bend, developers of open-world zombie em-up Days Gone. We don't know what they were working on, aside from the fact it was also to have a live service business model. In any case, both have been canned. The natural worry here is that the decision will lead to layoffs. Sony confirmed the cancellation, saying they took place after an internal review. However, they wouldn't commit to an answer about employee job security, saying only that they didn't intend to close the studios. Meanwhile, a memo was sent in an effort to reassure staff, letting them know PlayStation would try to ensure there is minimal business impact. The company would be working with studios to figure out what they'll be working on next, PlayStation told Bloomberg. So I have a ton of stuff to say about why this isn't news. But I'll try. I don't think I'll go into all of that. Other than to say, game cancellations happen all the time. They are frequently and frequently you don't know, right? So the reaction to this, because you have heard about a game cancellation, just understand there's multiple dozens of games that get canceled alongside games like this that you never hear anything about, because they were never announced. There was never a release date around them. They therefore have no accounting balance sheet impact and don't have to be announced because the SEC isn't going to hang you up by your toes, right? So, to a great extent, there's part of this that is a nothing burger. The fear of the studios being closed. Let's just walk back a little bit about what these studios are. Bend Studio, other than Days Gone, is largely a support studio that helps their other big marquee first-party studios that have made some of their critically acclaimed, high-selling titles, right? Since Siphon Filter, Bend doesn't really do a lot of their own. So the fact that they were working on a live service game, right, as the principal developer, is was them getting another swing at bat. So again, I don't necessarily know that I would slide down the rabbit hole of fearing that they're going to be closed, other than you couple that with some unhappiness from PlayStation about Days Gone, and then here's another game that they're working on, and the game got canceled. Now, why did the game get canceled? And the comment from Sony, which is that they took place after an internal review. And this is a thing that I talked about on Basement Radio Arcade podcast last Friday. Sony does internal reviews. There are gate reviews. If you look back at the DICE Awards, I think it was one of the other awards shows. It wasn't the TGAs. I think it was the DICE Awards, because Spider-Man 2, if I remember the tail of the tape, didn't get anything at the TGAs, but they got a number of awards at the DICE Awards. And when one of the developers came up on stage, he mentioned that that there had been numerous instances where Insomniac had gotten a relaxation on gate review dates. So one of the things that's been corroborating that we see is that PlayStation does internal reviews. When you're working on a project, they just don't send you off into a corner, and it's not waterfall development. You don't just, I mean, maybe it's less about it not being waterfall and being agile, but it's more about the fact that there is governance within the PlayStation house. You do periodically have to show up with Herman Holst and whoever is this board, talk about the status of your game, show the status of the game, report on your budget and what your budgetary outlook is, and whether you're burning hot, whether it looks like you're going to hit your due date. There is a regime of portfolio management around the game studios. And what we can see here is that these games came up for one of these periodic reviews, and they were told to put the brakes on it. Beyond there being a system of governance, then the question becomes, well, why did the games get canceled? I don't necessarily know. I mean, it's absolutely possible the games got canceled because they weren't looking good, and because they had expended a certain amount of time and a certain amount of budget, and they weren't making the progress that was needed, or the progress wasn't at the quality that they needed. There's also a very, very, very significant chance that PlayStation looked at these two live service games in the wake of Concord and in the wake of what's going on in the industry, and decided that they were going to stop hemorrhaging the cash that's associated with them, because it wasn't the bet that they thought it was when they greenlit them in the first place. That, again, is a natural, logical thing that happens and should happen. The fact that two games got canceled versus two games get put out that were below the quality bar, not in harmony with the market, and we're going to be more of an anchor. Because remember, when you launch a live service game, it's not just the O&M tail that's associated with a normal game in terms of like patching it, right? There's upkeep, there's daily operation spend, there's cloud spend that goes along with it. It's a much bigger deal to keep that game going. So again, I don't know that I would like fall over about these two games getting canceled. I mean, what would Ben have been doing otherwise? Ben would have been supporting Naughty Dog or Sucker Punch, right, or Sony Santa Monica, and whatever their next game is. So, yes, there's loss of an expenditure of funds, but I don't know that it's particularly impactful to the portfolio. Bluepoint was purchased primarily to be another port studio. And so, that's, theoretically, maybe that's what they're going to go back to. They stuck their toe in the door and pitched and campaigned to be allowed to go out, and supposedly they were supposed to be working on their own IP. So it's a little disappointing to hear what they were actually working on was already existing IP, but just doing it a live service. So I think the last thing that I'll say, and it may make some people cranky, and it's not a personal comment, but a lot of the regulars, a lot of the newly anointed regulars here, came over from Basement Radio Arcade podcast. And what I will say is I saw a lot of comments there when Jaffe was on, not because of Jaffe, but a lot of comments about this being horrible and criminal, and I can't remember exactly what the comments were, again, I'm not in sync with that sentiment. To me, this is negative and it's a setback. And I agree with Jaffe that it's there's an exacerbated feeling about it because of the overall production pipeline and what it's been for this generation. And that people haven't seen what they wanted to, what they wanted to have seen. And in that's mainly the hardcore crowd who pays uber attention to these things, haven't seen what they wanted to have seen. And I won't take that off the table. But I don't think it's it's the catastrophic event that some have felt that it is. It's disappointing. And in many ways, this generation, and I've said this before, this generation is going to be the lost generation. It's going to be the lost generation because the supply shortages at the beginning of the generation associated with the pandemic. At the end of the day, I don't think that there will be as many units of sell through as there have been in previous generations. I think, as we get closer to the end of this generation, people who haven't purchased a PlayStation 5 are just going to say, yeah, I'm just going to wait for the PlayStation 6. If they weren't so moved to buy a PS5 or a PS5 Pro, they're just going to wait. And so, by the same token, like the library is not as robust as it has been in previous generations in terms of new IP or even sequel iterations of kind of classic blue chip IP. And so yet again, people are going to be compelled to wait. And so there's going to be a bathtub effect, I think, in this generation in terms of hardware and software for both PlayStation and Xbox. And then you can go off and you can have an argument about who weathered that storm better. I mean, I think what we can say in hindsight now is Xbox had a huge problem getting out of the gate at the beginning of this generation with its production pipeline. I still to this date don't understand what went on for a company that literally makes Microsoft Teams and collaborative development environments for people to work remotely. So that's that. PlayStation appears to have had enough rounds in the chamber to step off with both feet at the beginning of the generation, but it appears as we started heading into the middle of the generation, that rocket started to lose fuel, right? So where both consoles will wind up at the end of the generation is, I think, like I said, an overall bathtub effect in terms of both hardware and software. And that's, like I said, this is just going to wind up being the lost generation. And there are market and industrial and societal reasons for that. Again, the pandemic caused a slow start or a drag on pace somewhere in the generation. But the march of technology is going to move on, right? I mean, clearly neither NVIDIA nor AMD are slowing down or skipping a beat and pushing their technology. And so, we're going to get a console generation rollover at the same 7-year point, I think, that we always have. And, we'll move on to the next generation. Sorry, I know that went long, but I tried to get it all out in one stream of consciousness. That's Tyler in the comments.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, I think like we knew they were working on, live service games, and I think what they said, like half a dozen or 10 or something, whatever the number was than they originally said. So we knew there was something out there. We just didn't know what. Obviously, these two were part of that, and who knows if they're going to continue on with that part of the business, if they're going to even try it or not. Yeah, I mean, it's hard out there right now. Like you said, Concord was a misstep, but then you see other stuff, like Marvel Rivals, getting up there and doing pretty good as far as I could tell. Seems to be doing well. So I mean, you just never know. And obviously, that's the known IP. Maybe Sony was going to try to bank on that with God of War. I was saying Gears of War, God of War. But these same people who are like, oh, we could have had a God of War game, God of War live service game would have been the same people like, oh, we're getting a God of War service game instead of something else, if that had come out. So it's it's that push and pull that we always see on the internet. So, but if this, like I said, if this article had never come out, we never would have known. And that's, like you said, happens all the time. So I think it is what it is.
Yeah, my last bit of personal pushback, and my apologies to Hero Down Under because he's not here. Like I'm not attacking what Hero Down Under said. I'm just saying I don't agree with it. Hero Down Under said he felt like a lot of these weren't good ideas, right? A God of War live service game wasn't a good idea. My feeling is that, and I'm not sure from what context he was thinking of, but my feeling is like all of these IP worlds are just worlds, right? They're just environments. Just like we took Halo, and within the world that is Halo, there were other stories to be told, right? And ODST and Reach are like two of the, well, I can't speak as much to ODST, but Reach was absolutely one of the best Halo games ever, in my opinion. And in similar vein, we have Star Wars, right, which is a very, again, different market and industry, right, but analogous. We have Star Wars, and historically, Star Wars has always told us a bunch of Skywalker stories. But what we've seen in the past recent years is like some of the most interesting creative stuff in the Star Wars universe is to not be a Skywalker story, right? And that gave us The Mandalorian, it gave us Rogue One. So my personal feeling is, right, and again, tons of fans are clamoring for factions, and factions is not an Ellie Joel story. It's just a thing that happens in the Last of Us universe. So I don't necessarily feel like, obviously the God of War live service game was not an effort to put Kratos in like a live service world, right? But that I don't know that there's any detriment to how well that game plays on the market. If For Honor, right, can survive and do well, and mount and what is it, mount it or whatever, I can't remember what the game is, but there are lots of medieval multiplayer games on PC that have done well. They've made a living. So I don't necessarily feel like games that are set in these worlds that people love are bad ideas. Just, I mean, but PlayStation has to figure that out and make sure that they stick the landing. But I don't feel like there's a hard set rule that says because you built a world in which a single player game exists, it therefore cannot be repurposed for like a multiplayer game. Like I feel like we do that all the time.
Yeah, it does happen. I mean, for maybe a lesser well-received game, all the multiplayer kind of Resident Evils that they always try to bring out, those don't quite go out so well. But it all depends on how the development goes. But unfortunately, they saw something they didn't like, so they're gonna get rid of it, or stop it. I should say, not get rid of it. But yeah, hopefully those developers are fine, and there's not, more than likely the way they worded it, there's probably going to be some layoffs or people let go just because they didn't outright say they weren't going to do it. So I mean, that's corporate speak. I see that all the time. So I know what that means when they're like, they're not going to, say anything specifically. So unfortunately, but hopefully the studios keep going. They get to do other stuff.
Yeah, I have right now. I have more confidence in the safety of Bluepoint than I have in Bend. I feel like, but Bend has disappointed and made people unhappy twice in a row now. And so again, this is my assumption, like the 50% chance, right, that the game got canceled because it wasn't shaping up. But again, there's a very good chance that PlayStation made a decision to pull the plug on those because of the market. And if they did that, then it doesn't reflect badly on the studios at all. And maybe hopefully then Bend is okay. I would love, well, I endured a ton of arguments about like not doing AAA marquee single player games. I think there's tons of interest in a Siphon Filter game. So hopefully Bend will eventually get back to that, particularly in a world where Sam Fisher isn't coming back anytime soon.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they might have seen, obviously with Concord, and then even these two high profile games, Concord and Suicide Squad, those fell flat, and they're like, oh, okay, let's reevaluate everything. So it makes sense. Business wise, but we'll see. All right, let's jump into round robin here to round out the episode. I got the first. Now I mentioned we're going to talk a lot about Call of Duty, but we are going to talk about it. I was playing a good bit of Call of Duty, like Game Logic had mentioned earlier. I had saw last Wednesday that they started their double XP weekend on a Wednesday, which I thought was kind of early. I don't know if I've ever seen it that early before, but so this was double XP for just experience, for weapons, and actually for Battle Pass, which I thought was kind of weird. I don't think I've ever seen them do the Battle Pass either. Now I know in the battle pass, sometimes they'll give you, double XP, tokens or whatever that you get in the game that you can use. But I've never actually seen a weekend. I don't know if you've ever seen that game.
Yeah, I mean, for definitely the Modern Warfare games, they definitely did. It was definitely all three categories.
Oh, okay, all right. Maybe just because I haven't played for so long, I had noticed it. But so I did that, and actually that Tuesday before, I actually had Prestige a second time, and now I'm already up to level 50 on my about to work on my third Prestige. So thank you, Double XP Weekend. So I should finish that out hopefully tonight, if not in the next couple days. But yeah, I just been playing multiplayer, just my regular mode. So nothing too exciting there. I don't know if you've played it all this past week. Like you said, I think you jumped on for the Double XP.
I've played nothing but Black Ops 6. I've been tackled at the shoestrings a little bit today because the box I was playing on today is the box with the 5950X and the RTX 3080 Ti, and for some reason that box today crashed 3 times in a 2-hour session. Throughout this week when I've played on it, it crashed once. It would, like, in a 2-hour time period, it would crash once. I would restart it and it would be fine. But today, for some reason, it crashed 3 times. And so when I go back and play after the podcast, when I had this before in Modern Warfare 3, and when that happened that season, it was crashing everywhere. And that's part of actually what shook me off of Modern Warfare 3 for a while, because for about a 3-week period of time, like I couldn't play the game reliably. But what I did during that time was I knocked off one of the NVIDIA features, and that seemed to return things to stability. I had turned down a lot of like the graphical eye candy, and then finally turned off some NVIDIA features, and then I was able to play fine. So I tried today to crank down to 1920 by 1080p, and it seemed to play more stably, but then I got another crash. So, but tonight I'm gonna try going in and turning off NVIDIA Reflex and seeing if that helps. But yeah, other than that, I've been playing all weekend. The stab in the heart was I got the third crash as I was like a quarter of a circle progression to pop in my Prestige 2. So so that's the thing that I need to do. Yeah, but yeah, I've been having a lot of fun. I realized tonight we talked a lot about maps last week. I mean, we won't dumpster dive in today. I realized today Derelict is a lot like Mexican border crossing, and that immediately made me dislike that map. because tonight people are laying on top of the train cars just like they would in Mexican border crossing. So
I do that a lot. I'll admit that. If I'm using my sniper or like a marksman rifle, I'll do that.
Yeah. So yeah. But other than that, I've been having a good time playing it.
Yeah, I've had a few crashes actually last couple weeks, even before the double XP. So, which is kind of weird because I didn't have any before that. I think maybe not last week, but the previous week I might have done there might have been an update for my 3070, I believe. So I don't know, but there were like I said, there's only been like a 2 or 3, so it hasn't been too bad. Well, I'll keep an eye on it. Go ahead if you want to jump into your next Apple Arcade game. Looks like you're playing.
Yeah, so I won't. Not too many comments. I didn't play that long, but I did pull down this week Final Fantasy Plus: The Ultimate Pixel Remaster on Apple Arcade. Played a little bit on my iPhone 16 Pro with PlayStation 5 DualSense controller. I'll be able to stick with this game because I did the work last year, applying the waters of a lot of JRPGs. So I'm just kind of interested from a historical perspective because obviously I haven't played any of the Final Fantasy games before, and so these older games I think are even of more interest to me than like Final Fantasy VII. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. There's a little less handholding and a lot more uncertainty and ambiguity about like where you're supposed to go next. So that may cause me a little bit of bother. So we'll see how that goes as the game progresses. But yeah, but I had, I had a decent time with it. It's not obviously it's not a graphical powerhouse, so it's kind of definitely one of those things that if you want to get into, it's you need to be like you need to have a hardcore interest in JRPGs or just a historical interest, which is this isn't something that I'm going to play for hours and hours and hours at a time. But in a little 30-minute session, that historical hook was enough to keep me interested.
Is this 1 through 3 or does it go past 3? Can't remember.
I think so. When I pulled the thread on this last year, because I was arguing with people about this whole thing of like the future of gaming is phones and tablets. I think the truth of the Final Fantasy series is they are all on mobile. They're all on Apple, on iOS and Android, except for like all of the, I want to say all of the games before like the PlayStation 2 era, I want to say, are on mobile, and there are other variants on there as well that are more modern that aren't necessarily parts of the US releases or the like the mainstream franchise. So some of them are gacha games, or mobile iterations, but from a design perspective they are just as modern as some of the more modern iterations before the remake.
All right, cool. All right, and then just my last game, kind of same from last week. No Man's Sky. I was going through this past 2 weeks expedition. That should, I believe, that's going to end on Wednesday this coming week, and then I believe I know there's at least one more expedition. I think that's the last one. I pretty much finished it. I just got to collect the rewards you get, but I'm kind of holding off because you can kind of still fly around and do stuff in that expedition because it's excuse me, it's actually a separate save than from your normal I shouldn't say a separate save, it's a separate instance from your normal, like if you're just going through the campaign gameplay. So you can kind of fly around and do stuff, and then you'll bring it all back, or most of it back to your main save or your main campaign. So like mostly like the nanites and the money and some of the other kind of currency you can kind of build up, because it seems like it's always a little easier to do stuff during these expeditions, or at least this one, just because they're kind of going back from the previous year. So I think they're trying to help you kind of get through it a little bit faster than normal, because these are only 2 weeks, but I think normally it's kind of like almost like a battle pass thing where they do it like every 3 months. It's like every quarter they do one. So, and I think they give you pretty much that whole time, maybe like 2 months, 2.5 months instead of the full 3. But so it's kind of fun to kind of go through there. And there's actually a Sentinel ship that I'm trying to get right now, so I'll be able to bring that back to my main save. Ramon, I got to figure out how to fit. And yeah, I know it's hard. This one has been pretty hard. Well, I was actually kind of playing before the holiday too. I kind of went back to it. I think mostly to get ready for these expeditions, because I kind of wanted to learn the systems again. Just kind of get my muscle memory back in place. So, but yeah, I've been having a lot of fun. So this one, it's called the Aquarius Expedition. So this was, I think I mentioned this last week. This is where you get to they added fishing into the game with this update, with this expedition, and then the update when it originally came out. So and I think at the end of this you get like maybe like a suit, like a new outfit or skin that you could put on yourself. I think it's like some kind of fish one or something like that, I think, if I remember correctly. The next week's if I remember correctly, if that's the one, there's a spaceship that they give you, and it kind of looks like the Millennium Falcon. That's why I kind of wanted it. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool, kind of familiar ship that you can get. So I'll continue with that this coming week. Speaking of this coming week, we got some new releases. Speaking of Final Fantasy, we got Final Fantasy VII Rebirth coming out on PC on January 23rd. Also on the 23rd is Synduality, Echo of Ada, which I'm not sure. Is that like an RPG or a JRPG?
This is actually a live service game. I want to say it is. I gotta look it up again. I want to say it's an extraction shooter. It's a PvPvE extraction shooter, and so it kind of hits on a few themes, right? Part of the reason extraction shooters are hard and brutal, and I think will only have so much traction on the market is because they're most of them. Well, Tarkov I think Tarkov for a while was only PvP. I think they've put some PvP in there, but I'm sorry. I think they've put some PvE in there, but when you're PvE, I don't think you can progress, or you can't get good loot. I think that's the way that works. But a lot of these games, extraction shooters, are PvP only. And so this is one that mixes it, and so you may get a balance in there where people can play the game without being super sweaty and movement kitties and and things like that. So I guess I don't know. It already has only mixed reviews on Steam, but I don't know. I guess maybe some people are playing it in early access or what they call advanced access. But usually, when games are like that, they don't let people put reviews up. But maybe that's changed now that the whole Steam made some change last year where it was that's right. It was about because I guess previously before, like if you were playing in early access, they didn't count against your refund timer. And so your refund timer, your 2 hours only started like when the game actually released. And I think they walked that back last year and they were like, no. If you're playing in early access, your clock starts now. So maybe when they did that, they allowed people to put reviews on there. But that's why it caught my eye and got on my radar, is because it's an extraction shooter, but it's PvP VE. It actually looks pretty good too.
Yeah, it's got I had never heard of this before, but it's got that sci-fi mech theme to it. So yeah, it looks pretty cool. So that's coming out for consoles, PS5, Xbox, and PC, also on the 23rd. And then another one on 23rd, Tokyo Extreme Racing Early Access on PC, January 23rd. So that one I've heard of. I've heard of that series before. So
and the reason it got on my radar and I put it on the list was because it's definitely kind of like a spiritual harkening back to the Midnight Club Racing series that was on console. I guess they did like 5 of those games. I didn't realize, but they did like Los Angeles, New York, Tokyo was the only one I remember, but I guess they did 5 in total. And so the game doesn't have like very super detailed graphics, although the graphics that they do have do look good and sharp and colorful. And it uses, apparently it has car licenses because like the Mazda RX-8 is in there, so it's a lot of cars kind of at the height of the what I want to say of like the Tokyo Drift, before Fast and Furious got totally off the rails and they started driving tanks and dropping out of C-130s. So it kind of harkens back to that time. So yeah, it should be pretty interesting to see how it lands.
So we won't see The Rock or Jason Statham in this this game. So is this like an open world game or something? Because that's kind of weird. That's an early access, or is it a live service game?
I'm not sure if it's. I thought it was just regular wheel to wheel racing, but I could be wrong.
I was just wondering because since it was early access on just kind of a racing game, I don't have seen those yet. So
no,
but everything's early access nowadays. So what the heck? All right. Anything you're going to pick up? Are you going to pick up Sin Duality or Tokyo Extreme Racing?
I'm probably not going to pick it up like day one, but I will keep an eye on it and see how it goes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I probably won't pick up either of these ones. The Sin Duality does look kind of interesting, but I'll have to keep my eye on at least on that one, just to see how that pans out.
Did you ever go back to what is the survival shooter game that came out last year? What was it? Once Human or something like that?
Yeah, there was Once Human I played. I haven't gone back to it for a while. Not since that first maybe month that I had been playing it a fair bit.
Yeah, because it didn't launch that well, but it's quickly picked up the pace to mostly positive reviews.
Yeah, it was really good. It's just like when I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago when I first started playing, or maybe during the superlatives when I first started playing it. I was actually playing with a group of people, and that helped a lot because you're building, you got to build your base and stuff, and go out and get resources. And so it's a lot easier when obviously when you're with people doing that. But after I kind of fell off of it, but I didn't fall off of it. I just got distracted by other things, and then once I wanted to come back to it, they kind of went to other games. So I was like, it was fine kind of playing alone. Like I tried it a few times and I was like, it was fun. It was more fun with a group.
One other thing that should be noted, a game we had in the rundown last week, because it was releasing, but it was also early access, was Assetto Corsa Evo, which did release to early access last week and is at mostly positive reviews on Steam. So apparently doing pretty decently with the Assetto Corsa crowd.
Nice. Yeah, I know. I was actually reading an article about the VR mode, which is, I guess, not too great right now. So it isn't early access though. So I mean, give some time. I'm sure it'll get back up there. I think that was the original one. Was one of the I always saw that it was like one of the best VR experiences, at least for racing games. So hopefully, I don't know if you ever check that out when you're into VR, but
yeah, the only racing game I've played in VR was the Project Cars games.
Oh, okay.
Which I thought were pretty decent, but it's just look. I mean, I love it, but as I constantly talk about with regards to VR, like it's just such a chore, to hook everything up and update everything, and and again, I was old. I was in VR much sooner when you had to keep the Vive store and the Oculus store and all that stuff up to date. And now, like you don't have to download that stuff, and everything will just run like in Windows and with Steam. So I assume it's easier now. But for my game room where I don't keep a VR headset hooked up like all the time, it's always I got to take it out of the box and unpack it. And now the only one I have is the Vive, and so it's like 90 bajillion things to hook up. So.
That has sensors, right? Or cameras or something?
Yeah.
Okay. That one would be a chore. Yeah. Set those up.
Yeah, which is fine. Like I said, it's all because of my paradigm of where I don't leave the stuff hooked up. Like if you leave the stuff hooked up, it's not that money. And you can buy new Vive headsets that don't need the sensors. The sensors actually, for those newer headsets, the sensors actually help make it, because they make those headsets even more accurate, because then you have both the inside out tracking cameras plus the external sensors. So yeah, at the end of the day, I think it's a very robust system and very competitive. But for me in my room, like it's just every time I go to I'm thinking about going to play VR. I'm like, do I want to just play a game, or do I want to invest the 30 minutes in setting everything up?
I say this every time, but I still gotta try it in No Man's Sky. I heard it's really cool VR in that, so gotta try that. I think that's it for the show today. Any other comments or anything on anything you might be playing coming up? No? All right. Please catch us next week, where hopefully DB should be back because he is scheduled to host. If not, one of us will jump in the seat. Thank you, everybody, for stopping by the comments. Ramon, Nate, Wara, I believe that was it, at least that I saw that showed up. Thank you for anybody who watches it later on in VOD, either through YouTube or if you catch us on one of your favorite podcast catchers. Please join us next week for episode number 373. This has been episode number 372 of Enough to Keep Going podcast. I am Talmaster99. That is Game Logic. Thank you for joining me tonight. We'll see you next week. Please keep playing those games and take care of each other. See you next time.